almost all the cultures have been directly or indirectly impacted by the Indian philosophy called idealism. Christianity itself is a product of Indian idealism. The story is the great father is coming back home. He finds that his children are all playing inside the house, but the house is burning. He tries his best to get the children to come out, but the children just won't listen. Finally, the father says he has a lot of toys with him. When the children hear this bribe, they all come running out of the house and they're saved. Did the father commit a sin? In the centuries after Ashoka the Great, Indian thinkers and Indian philosophers started spilling out all over the world. In India for the last 1,000 years, we have been more interested in preserving things perfectly rather than generating mutations in our thought process. One country produces a set of ideas, it gets exported. The original country forgets it completely. The exported ideas mutate and evolve into huge institutions. It comes back and imposes the same principles again on the original country. Indians just absorbing ideas from abroad without generating new ones for themselves or for the world. This is a situation that has existed only for the last 300 years. Before that, all the civilizations on Earth were looking up to India for ideas. There was high demand for Indian books, Indian mathematical books, Indian astronomical books, Indian medical books. People were sending missions to gather books until just 300 years ago. India was the top idea-generating country in the world. There are books that not many people read. It's a good bet to go there because you might discover things no one else has.
Everybody, good morning, namaste. My name is Sudha Jagannathan.
Namaste, good.
And I welcome you all to our webinar today. I'm on the board of Coalition of Hindus of North America, also known as CoHNA. My co-host here today is Vaishakhi Maya. And the two of us are going to have an interesting conversation with a young new author, Dr. Joseph Noony. And he's joining us from India. Welcome, Joseph, and we are excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. Let's have a great discussion.
Yeah. Anyway, the book, I'm going to try and show the book which Vaishakhi and I have read. This is the book. It's Will of the Tathagatha, and Joe's pen name is Joe Agneya. It's here. And all three of us have. I also have lots of notes sticking out of here because there were so many interesting points, but today we cannot cover only so much. But I think, Joe, you're going to be having a series of conversations, right? That will be recorded and put out.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's an important subject. So, and Vaishakhi, you want to just give an introduction of the book topic and how we are going to go about it?
Yeah, sure. So I think even the book, The Will of the Tathagatha, kind of looks at this, I would say, very little studied and maybe in mainstream ignored influence of Buddhism in early Christianity and how parts of the Mediterranean world was such a melting pot, and it had all these different influences, and Buddhism was such a big influence in early Christianity. And I think it's one of those where the more you look at it, the more you become convinced. And I think Joe's book does a good job of putting all of that together and slowly building the case for why there was such a strong influence. And it wasn't just coincidences and happenstances when you look at Google search of Buddhist influences on Christianity, what they say is, no, it's just coincidence, but it actually goes deeper than that. And I think that's what this book does. It's to slowly build the case of what's there and to also show that this is a vast ocean. And even Joe himself, he accepts that he's only looked at the surface of it. And there's actually so many more books that haven't been translated, that haven't been studied, and there's so much more to do here. So do you think I captured the essence correctly?
Yes, that was a pretty good job of essence.
I also want to really give you a formal introduction of Joe. He's a young Indian, and he is an Indian doctor, but Joe was born in Kerala and raised there, and he just completed his medical degree from St. John's Medical College in Bangalore. And what is really fascinating to me is his varied interests. His interests range from Indian philosophy to the history of ideas, mathematics, ancient Indian literature, Indo-European literature, evolutionary biology, medicine, and he is a mountaineer. I have seen a couple of his tweets saying, I'm going off on a trip. But he never posts anything about his that passion, but everything about his book. I think I should call him Rishi Agneya because no, Joe is so well read. And that I think is one thing we want to encourage amongst the young Indians, anywhere, to have that curiosity to learn and understand the past and how it relates to present, how it might shape the future. And I think that's where we want to go with this particular interview. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about your, passion for reading all of these things while you did your medical degree.
Reading, I wouldn't call it passion. I think it's just like eating food or breathing. I mean, reading should come. I mean, it's so important. You are what you consume. Your health and your body is what you eat. Then obviously, what you feed your brain will decide a lot of your personality and a lot of how your life turns out, your worldview. Everything depends on reading. It's true that we lack a reading culture right now. Even in my personal circles, it's quite difficult to find someone to engage in such deep conversations with, because people just don't read. So for me, people like that, I've only found online, to be honest. So because people just don't read nowadays, especially difficult books, especially the classics, especially the originals. The more original you read, the more original the kind of literature you read, the more original your thoughts will be. And yeah, so especially for writing, I have to refer a lot out of the old books. Reading old books, especially, really helps you build your your thinking.
One of the questions one of the points you raised was you said, you say that Indian idealism is the most powerful philosophy in all of history. I'd like you to kind of delve into that and give the audience a little bit of a sense of how what do you think about it?
It's Indian idealism. So the apt word for it is either Advaita or Chitta Matra. Means in one word, it just means mind only. Chitta Matra, only mind. So that sounds simple enough, but the more you study it and the more you understand it, you begin to see how this simple idea has had such tremendous effects across almost all the cultures in the world. I think all the major cultures, especially the ones that are surviving today, have been directly or indirectly impacted by this Indian philosophy called idealism. It's what's strange is this is the oldest philosophy. It's not just the most sophisticated; it's also the oldest. The origin of this philosophy is in the Upanishads. So while the Upanishadic thinkers laid the groundwork, they could not. I mean, it was too early in history to properly systematize a system of thought. That job was done 1,000 years later by the Mahayanists. They took the essential principles out of the early Advaita. They studied it deeply, wrote hundreds of books on it. They studied every aspect of it, and they created and they even created secondary literature based on this philosophy. The Mahayanists, they started writing all these stories, all these monastic codes. They even created institutions inspired by idealism, and all these things rapidly spread all over the world. And I'm kind of stunned that people aren't noticing it. I mean, it's right there. It's obvious. It's right in front of us, but people are just not seeing how all these things emerged out of Indian idealism and how it has profoundly impacted the world and all its cultures. It's like the elephant in the room. Such a huge thing. People are just have been missing it for centuries. So yeah, Indian. I'm not sure if in my personal experience, people don't understand what idealism is. When they hear the word idealism, I think many people think it's just carrying around some ideals in your head. That's that's a very silly understanding, but that's what almost everyone I've asked the question has replied. If people don't know what idealism is, it's the most sophisticated philosophy, and we'll need to take lectures to properly explain what is the difference between idealism and realism. Basically, all philosophy can be categorized into two. It's either idealism or realism. Apart from Advaita and the Mahayana philosophy, almost all the other branches of Indian philosophy fall into the realist category. So you think we need to expand on that? because it's a little complicated. It's a complicated
Yeah,
topic.
no, I would like you to talk about how understanding all of that and the reading led to a book. I mean, you are a young person and you've done a great
No,
job. Yeah.
but I think it's because for me it started in the Ramakrishna ashram. One day when I was in ninth grade or something, there was this ashram near my school. One day, for some reason, I think it was raining heavily or something. I just walked into that ashram. There was a huge painting of Swami Vivekananda. It was almost like he was beckoning me, come in. Why are you standing there? Just come in. And when I walked in, I think life changed forever, because there was a huge library in there, bookstore, everything I needed was in there. So my journey starts in a Ramakrishna Mission library. So that's my first exposure to Indian idealism. And from there, I started reading. I read widely. I read all kinds of. I actually enjoy reading vastly different things. For example, uh, the New Testament Apocrypha, the books that were banned in the 4th century in the Mediterranean world. So when they banned something, you're a little tempted. Oh, they banned it. Why did they ban these books? I want to find out. So I have that kind of curiosity. If you try to prevent me from reading something, oh yeah, I'm going to read it. I'll read it. So I read the Apocrypha, and then along with that, I started reading these Mahayana books. Slowly, you start seeing the patterns. I mean, it doesn't matter how different and unconnected two sets of libraries appear. If you read them deeply enough, you will eventually start to see where they converge. So my study of Indian idealism culminated in the realization that Christianity itself is a product of Indian idealism, even though it underwent a lot of mutations in the process. That sounds like a huge claim. I mean, how are you connecting Christianity and Indian philosophy? But that's the unavoidable conclusion once you have compared the Mahayana corpus and the early Christian literature, including the Apocrypha. I think I've made a strong case in the book for that.
I actually wanted to talk about all of these books that you've read. I think you say you had access to this great library, but it's still like, I mean, you have 500, not 500, you have like 40 pages of citations. And I'm sure that was built over time. What would you tell a young person today who wants to start reading, but there are so many of these books? How would you suggest that they get started on all of these, reading these very diverse, different types of books, as you said, the New Testament or the Old Testament books, and also Buddhist books, and also the Hindu philosophy? There are so many different things that they should read. How would you suggest that they build that kind of range in their reading habits?
I mean, reading is not for fun. I mean, for me personally, I don't read for fun. I mean, it's not like, I mean, if a book seems difficult, that doesn't stop me from reading it. I take it slow. I make notes. If you find something interesting, some area interesting, I would say start there. Or another approach is, if there are books that not many people read, I think it's a good bet to go there, because you might discover things no one else has. So there are a lot of books like that. I mean, I've listed many survey of sources in the will of Tathagatha from both the Mediterranean world and the Indian books. So these are books people have not been reading for centuries. So if you do that, if you're someone who seeks the joy of discovery or something like that, I think books like that would be a good choice. A lot of these Mahayana books, a lot of the early Vedic books are also things that people don't read anymore, especially the writings of Mahidasa. I would call him the father of Indian philosophy. So a lot of these Aranyakas and Brahmanas, people don't read them nowadays. And I've just started reading those books again, because I think a lot of information is laying hidden there, and since people are not reading it, I might as well do it and drag the findings out. So yeah, so we need people to read these books. I mean, I hope you've seen those survey of sources, or at least 4 survey of sources in the will of these are the important books for this topic, not just this topic, for the broader aspects of Indian philosophy. These books, we need people to read these books. We need people to compare these books, and we need people to bring out the connections. I mean, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. It's a quote.
Very saying. When you started posting after you published this book, I found it fascinating. You had a lot of the parables, in the Christian stories and the Mahayana. Do you want to pick one and kind of walk through how those patterns emerged for you? Maybe the woman at the well.
Almost, Woman at the Well is not a parable; it's an actual story. So,
okay,
parable in the sense is a parable of the prodigal son. It's one of the most famous parables. So the source for that is the Lotus Sutra. You'll find the parable of the prodigal son, a son who disobeys the father, takes his share of the wealth and walks off, only to return later. That's the basic skeleton of the story. You'll find it in the Lotus Sutra. So whichever parable you take, you will find it in the Mahayana books or even the Pali books. That's very old. It's 4th century, 5th century BC old. For me personally, in my reading, the parable that stunned me the most was the very first parable in the Buddhist books. It's called I call it the parable of the burning house. So the story affected me deeply because it's throwing question the meaning, morality itself. We humans invent morality, and morality that doesn't exist by itself. That's the kind of import you get from reading the story. But sadly, this story, this parable, I couldn't find it anywhere in the Christian corpus. But I felt somewhere that the story should be there somewhere in the corpus, if not in the New Testament, at least in the Apocrypha, the books that were banned and burned in the 4th century. And I found it this endeavor of mine, this yajna of mine, you can call it, was finding this parable in the Christian corpus. It's found in the book called the Gospel of the Apocryphon of Philip, or the Gospel of Philip. I found it, and I haven't published it in this volume. Maybe for a future volume. Basically, the story is there's the great father is coming back home. When he's coming back home, he finds that his children are all playing inside the house, but the house is burning. He tries his best to get the children to come out. He begs the children to come out. He orders them to come out. He pleads with them, but the children just won't listen. They're so engrossed in their playing. They're completely ignoring the danger they're in, the dangers of the world. They're ignoring everything, and they continue to play. So finally, the father says he has a lot of toys with him. He has a lot of toys and sweets in his pockets. If you come down now, you can have it all. So when the children hear this bribe, they all come running out of the house and they're saved. But when they ask him for the sweets and the toys, the father said, I don't have any. Now the narrator of the story, the Buddha himself, finally asks the question, did the father commit a sin by lying? That's the question that, what do you think? Did he lie? Did he commit a sin?
He saved a lot of lives. So that's a tough question. That's a real dilemma of morality. He saved lives.
Yeah.
And he used something to entice people to get out. But I kind of find in that particular story, you're saying this is what we also, in our belief system, we say we are all in a Maya. We need to get out of the Maya. We need to really understand our ultimate goal in life. But then these, the attractions of the world keep us looped in. How do you get out? And, in one sense, I feel like maybe
don't you think this philosophy is very close to the
yeah, exactly.
The end goal.
Yeah. Justifies the means.
The goal is more important than the means. Yeah. The end justifies the means. So in a lot of ways, the Mahayanists are truly continuing the Vedic idealism in various in morality, in ontology, in their approach to the world. There's a definite continuity here. So I personally feel the biggest import from the story is this parable gives the mentality of the Mahayana monk. Okay, the monks and philosophers that India was releasing into all corners of the world in the centuries after Ashoka the Great. After Ashoka, Indian thinkers and Indian philosophers started spilling out all over the world: China, the Mediterranean world, Persia, Central Asia, Sri Lanka, Egypt. They were everywhere. You can say they were the first globalists, maybe. These guys were going around. They were spreading Indian ethics, Indian stories, Indian literature, Indian religion, Indian philosophy, and this is the guiding moral code they had. They had a goal, and it doesn't matter how they reach it, what means they use. They have to accomplish their purpose. Their purpose is converting the world to Indian culture, to Indian ethics, Indian religion, Indian beliefs, Indian philosophy, spreading Indian institutions. And what are these institutions, by the way? the institution of the monastery, the institution of the university, the institutions of hospitals, all these things. So wouldn't you agree that the story reveals to us the mind of the monks who created the
Yeah.
problem we are dealing with in the book? So
Yeah.
that's the reason this parable affected me so much. And I'm very happy that I finally located it in the Christian corpus too.
Wonderful. Your book right now says volume 1. So I think you have a lot of other
Yeah.
volumes, right?
I think I'll need 2 more to complete to bring out the data in a comprehensive
Okay.
manner. I think I'll need 2 more.
You call these globalists, the early Indian philosophers who traveled, as rogue, right?
They were
Rogue
rogue.
philosophers. Yeah. And I understand what you mean by it, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about why they were the rogue philosophers.
They were rogue because, in simple words, they were thinking for themselves. There's a quote by Bodhidharma: "Kill the Buddha, kill the patriarchs. Right and wrong are one. Delusion is wisdom. Samsara is nirvana." You will find equivalents to the meanings of these quotes in the Upanishads too, because even though they look different, Indian idealism, both Hindu and Buddhist, they are similar. They have a phylogenetic similarity. They are deeply convergent, even though they appear to be different. So when you say rogue, what it means is the Buddha, for example, he said you can reject even his own teachings if it goes against your experience. Okay, so these Mahayanists are taking this idea to the extreme. Okay, they were free to do what they wanted. I mean, what they want with the books and the literature they have, as long as they accomplish their goal. It may be a personal goal. It may be a goal of a sangha. It may be a goal of a group of writers. And that's exactly what they did. If you read the Mahayana book like the Lotus Sutra, you will find this idea repeated. Okay, I think I've quoted it a few times in the book. Have you seen it? The quote from the Lotus Sutra. Just give me a minute. I'll just find. Yeah, basically it says you can use parables, you can use analogies, you can use stories, you can use illustrations, you can do this, you can do that. So that's the idea here. I mean, these guys don't take all their ideas from their guru. These guys don't outsource their thinking. They don't outsource their decision making. They think for themselves. I think that kind of a mentality has been missing in India for the last 1,000 years. We have been more interested in preserving things perfectly rather than generating mutations in our thought process. So my personal opinion is that has done some damage. We have not been able to generate the kind of varied thought processes that we see in the last 300 years in Europe, for instance, the Age of Enlightenment. You throw one good idea at them and they'll mutate it into 5, 6, 7 new things. That's the kind of attitude that they exhibit in the Age of Enlightenment. I think we were also like that until 1,000 years ago, but we became very conservative and very much more interested in preservation rather than propagation yeah. So
I actually do note that I think in one of the chapters you do point out that this very same point that in Indian philosophy we do need now an innovation, and this is kind of movement that comes up with new ideas and not just preserving the old. I think a question that I have is, this is more of what are your thoughts on this, on why this happened, but as you said, the Buddhist monks went everywhere, and we can see their influences in China, in Japan, lots of Southeast Asian places. It's very obvious. It's an integrated part of the culture, and a lot of people still have Buddhism as one of their religions. But then when you look west, you don't see that much anymore. You don't see that, even though the distance is roughly the same, you would expect that there were Buddhist monks in all these Western places. To the west of India. Why do you think we don't see this kind of memory or this memory of these Buddhist monks in the West anymore as much as we do see it in the East?
That's quite a complicated question, because you can look at it 2 ways. In one way is, as you said, there's no memory of Buddhism. The Buddhism seems to have vanished. I mean, it looks very different compared to Southeast Asia or East Asia. But another way to look at it is how deeply the activities of these ancient Buddhist monks have impacted and changed the Western hemisphere of the globe. Okay, so even if they have forgotten it, their ethics, their institutions, their stories, their philosophy is all still pervasively Buddhist or Indian, even now. Even after all these centuries of erasure, even of all these, there's a word called damnatio memoriae. Have you heard of it? It's probably the worst thing the church can do to you in ancient times. Damnatio memoriae, an author or a philosopher or a theologian who goes against the orthodoxy or the beliefs of the orthodoxy can get erased from memory. All his books are destroyed. His books are not copied forward. All his legacy is erased. All citations of him get erased. He gets erased from history. A lot of people have suffered this fate. It's probably the worst fate for a writer to undergo damnatio memoriae. So that has happened to many writers. Many writers who are critical in the process of transferring in Indian literature to the Mediterranean world. Many of them have been erased like this. I can name at least quite a few. For example, Papias. He was an early church father. He was a very, very strange person whom I am, who can be suspected to be one of the main people involved in this in the 2nd century. Origen. Then we had Evergrace Ponticus. A lot of people suffered this fate. So yeah. So I'm not sure I agree with your statement that the Western Hemisphere that does not appear to be Buddhist. It's the elephant in the room. People are not seeing it. I don't know why people are not seeing it, but it's there. It's right there. You just have to look a little deeper.
Yeah.
In your book, you do talk a little bit about the misses. You said the 1,000 years. We have kind of turned inward and stopped innovation of ideas. One of the things you talk about is how even our constitution, our law system, everything in India, right, are based on the British system, which actually copied the Republic system of India. And maybe you should talk about that. I think that's pretty fascinating, to think about.
It's one of the weirdest quirks in history. I mean, how does this happen? I mean, one country produces a set of ideas, it gets exported. The original country forgets it completely. And then the exported ideas mutate and evolve into huge institutions, into corporate law, into private companies, into colonialism. It comes back and imposes the same principles again on the original country. So we are also morally conflicted at the end. Was it actually a good process? We got our stuff back, but then it damaged us in so many ways. That's also to be considered. So it's a complicated topic yet again. So the British parliamentary philosophy, which is what we're talking about here, were created by the Benedictine monks. I mean, a major share in the evolution of the British parliamentary philosophy were the Benedictine monks, who had all these parliamentary law and parliamentary principles for governing their monasteries and institutions. So I've always noticed. I mean, we've studied civics in school, right? And we also read the papers, and so we understand how the Indian Constitution works. And a lot of people do try to clear the civil service exam. If you are preparing for the civil service exam, again you have to study the Indian Constitution quite deeply. So I always had these concepts in mind. But then when I started reading the Vinaya Pitaka, this happened a few years ago, it was just quite disturbing, actually. Why is it that these principles that we see in a functional constitution, in a functional parliament today, why is it so similar to the same principles in the Vinaya, this 5th century BC Indian book? There are many examples of the concept of quorum, the concept of the elected speaker, decision making by vote, the formation of committees, the veto power, this, that. You can list dozens of original ideas from the Vinaya Pitaka that seems quite identical to the principles that are functioning in modern parliaments across the world. But I noticed this years ago, but I had no explanation for this. I mean, it was weird. It felt strange. It was slightly irritating also, because when you see something so strong, but then you have no explanation. How is this possible? Thousands of kilometers away, thousands of years apart, these philosophies were created. Why are they so similar? And I mean, I personally, I have never believed that there are coincidences in history. If something feels strange, there most certainly is something strange that happened behind the scenes. So it took me a little time to finally figure it out how this happened. So the answer is the Benedictine monks. When I saw that it was the Bishop of Canterbury who defeated the King of Britain and established the Magna Carta, the answers started falling in place because the Benedictine monks came from Italy, and Saint Benedict himself and all the monastic lawmakers in Europe, almost all of them, either directly studied Egyptian monastic documents or themselves went to Egypt to study monastic law from Egypt, which is very funny because what's there in Egypt to account for such sophisticated parliamentary principles? Nothing. And all of Egypt is not a civilization famous for its political philosophy, is it? We know of the great pharaohs and all the pyramids, and it's a deeply monarchical country. There's nothing to explain for the presence of such philosophy there. So when I started digging Egypt a little bit, the answer came. The answer was Ashoka and his monks. That's how it reached Egypt. Yeah, so it's ironic the way our principles came back to us, but the way we took it without understanding it, without critical thinking. This is called critical thinking. You can't just study the Indian Parliament and not ask questions. Who created these principles? How did they create these principles? How did it evolve? It's pretty sad that in Indian lawmakers, in Indian makers of the Indian Constitution, did not ask such critical questions. I think even Ambedkar, I think he missed it. Although he has noted in some of his writings, I've seen that these principles are these principles are present in the Vinaya. I mean, he has mentioned that somewhere, but he has not made the connection. If he had, it would have been an extremely momentous discovery, because he was the one who had a great role in the creation of the modern Constitution of India. And he was in that unique position in history to Indianize the principles again, rather than the completely anglicized, Latinized version we have today. It would have been an opportunity to go back to our roots and bring out the great Vaishali principles again. The Vaishali Republican principle. That's what I call it. I mean, Vaishali is very old, by the way. It's older than you can imagine. It's older. It's as old. Vaishali existed in Vedic times. According to the Shadapada Brahmana, the kingdom of Videha once existed on the banks of the Saraswati. It was a kingdom. It was a Harappan kingdom. It was a kingdom in the Indus Valley civilization. After the loss of Saraswati, they migrated to the Gangetic plain. This migration is clearly mentioned in the Vedic text. So the ultimate source for these principles is the Harappan civilization, the Sindhu Saraswati civilization. So yeah, this is something I think more Indians should understand, because it's too important to be ignored the way it is being ignored.
Yeah. Also there are now books, a lot of books that trace a maritime history of India from the past. So when you say the Buddhist monks brought things to Egypt, I think even before that or around that time or after that, the traders from India would come and, following the monsoons and settle, in ports of Egypt or along the Red Sea. And I think a lot of this happened. And also they created a whole system of commerce. That's just what I've read, the system of commerce and recording and everything. So I kind of feel like, today we talk about it, and Rajiv Malhotra's books have talked about it as the West absorbing the Eastern knowledge systems, digesting it and regurgitating it. And so in India, we are eating the dirt, instead of going back to our origins of thinking. Somehow, I completely agree with you that our education system, the one I came through in India, and the lack of thinking, innovation and generating new ideas is not there anymore. But I'm hoping people like you will actually spark the interest amongst the young. There is an urge interest amongst the youngs to know more. But I think they have to have an interest in reading like you, seeing patterns and bringing it back together. And hopefully India becomes, another cauldron for new ideas. Because what you just said is so fascinating, how these ideas were left. But today's world is different. At that time, maybe the Indian ideas were received in certain positive ways. But today, if you
Yes.
go talk about Indian ideas, it's immediately rejected. For example, I saw an Instagram thing about Fibonacci doing all this fantastic stuff. Only one or two people post and say it's not Fibonacci, it's Pingala, who came up with this in 200 BC or something. And we are at a point we are constantly now trying to defend, say a knowledge system. We don't have a systemic way of cataloging and then claiming, right? And if you look at the knowledge systems of our yoga, meditation, we give it away. And then it's appropriated again, right? So you may have the Christian yoga, the Muslim yoga, the goat yoga, the gun yoga, and the Indians say nothing. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So India, what we need to understand that the situation we are experiencing and seeing now of Indians just absorbing ideas from abroad without generating new ones for themselves or for the world. This is a situation that has existed only for the last 300 years. Before that, all the civilizations on earth were looking up to India for ideas. There was high demand for Indian books, Indian mathematical books, Indian astronomical book, Indian medical books, Indian philosophy, Indian stories, Indian storybooks, animal stories, the Panchatantra, everything. There was huge demand all over the world for India. People were flocking here to get books. People were buying it. People were sending missions to gather books. The Persian emperor sent a mission. His top scientists were sent to India to gather books. The Greeks were coming for getting books. Everyone was flocking here to get, and not just that. These Indian monks, especially the Mahayana monks, were taking Indian books everywhere. They were taking mathematical They were not just taking Buddhist books. They were taking Hindu books too. They were taking mathematical treatises too to China. They're the ones who took in Indian mathematics to China, Indian mathematics and astronomy to China. They were taking even the Arthashastra has been found in the Vatican archives. So that was the normal until just 300 years ago. India was the top idea generating country in the world, and much of the world was one could say functioning in many aspects on Indian ideas, because you know the difference between the Greek numerals and the Indian numerals, right? So they cannot handle fractions. The very simple thing we take for granted nowadays, the ability to do mathematics, even fractions were quite an impossibility with Roman numerals. So when Indian mathematics finally arrived in the medieval age, it revolutionized their society. It took time. It took centuries to accept it. It was initially called the numbers of the devil when it first reached the Indian numerals were called the numbers of the devil, and zero, they had a very hard time accepting it. Shunya, how can you treat nothing as something? It took centuries, or both these took centuries. And later when the Kerala documents, Kerala calculus texts arrived again in the 16th century, even that took 100-200 years for them to understand and digest, because we have science that people are taking smaller concepts out of it in the centuries prior, but they were not able to digest the whole thing the way Isaac Newton and Leibniz were eventually able to do. So I think the script flipped only in the 17th or 18th century. Even in the 17th century, we have Europeans scouring in India for man. Even in the 18th century, the Indian Vivyakarana, Indian grammatical books were greatly sought. And that's how we have the modern science of linguistics. Linguistics is very truly a translation of Paninian grammar into English, Latin, and layers. So we should not get too daunted by what's going on right now. I think it's a temporary event. It's a quirk of history, but I think Indians will once again recover lost ground and think for themselves. First step is to understand these. In my book, I've listed 5 times. I mean, I hope you've seen it in the introduction, the turning of the wheel. There have been 5 times in history that Indian literature exerted profound, world-changing influence. The third of these is the Mahayana origins of Christianity. There were events before that, and there were events after that too. Yeah, so we have to go back how it was.
Yeah. One of the things that is talked about today is how even the Panini's grammar, is Panini. Okay, it's being deconstructed and separated from philosophical roots, so the West can claim, to whatever the essence of it is. They also say the Buddhism is happening the same way. The West wants to just, filter out, distill the meditative and all sorts of things, but leave out the philosophy. So while that is happening, I want to encourage young Indians to follow your footsteps, read, re-establish, and claim the knowledge systems of India. And that's the only way we can begin again, starting from a base which we already have, and then the West has, developed that. But to go forward from there, we need a whole army of young people who are curious and interested, right? So I just want to say that is going to be a big, a huge project, an initiative. I'm seeing a little bit of here and there in India an interest in it. And hopefully with more of your books and more people listening to what you have written, I think that would spark a regeneration of all of this. Now, I posted this about your question. A French monastery is named after a powerful Indian city. I don't think anybody has answered it. So what is this monastery, Joe?
This takes us back to the question Vaishagi asked. I mean, why have they forgotten about the Buddhist roots? I mean, I think the higher-ups know. I mean, have always known, the higher-ups in the church echelons. I mean, they've known it. That's why we have a medieval monastery called Versailles. We have a medieval monastery in the heart of France called Versailles. It's named after Vaishali, the mother of democracy, where all these principles we just discussed came from Vaishali. There's a monastery named after that city, that ancient Indian city. So not just that, the question of the wheel in the heart of the Vatican, which that wheel was built in the 15th or 16th century.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no explanation how it happened or who was behind it, but it's very strange. I mean, that's the emblem of Magadha. The emblem of Magadha has been punched in the heart of Rome. That's how I see it. I don't know how it happened, who's behind it, but it's there.
Yeah, Joe has a couple of tweets on that shows a picture of that basilica and the columns, the Bernini columns. I think that's what it's called, the Bernini columns, and that is Joe says, the chakra from Magadha. Yeah, that is at the heart of the Christian world. Very interesting to think about.
The Roman Empire.
Yeah, Roman Empire. Yes. When we talk, I just want everybody to understand, when we talk about these things, it's not picking on any particular faith or any people. It's just bringing out facts as young people, like Joe sees from his readings and understandings of the world itself. And it's important, I think, for all of us to know all of this stuff. So collectively, that's the next question I want to ask you. So what do you think? You also asked that question in one of your tweets. The future of religion, right? Going forward, the world is totally in conflict on the basis of faith. So how can, let's say, some of this idealism, the philosophies of India help, the 7 billion to 9 billion people move forward with a basic common understanding of mutual respect?
I consider myself philosophically an Indian idealist. That's how I would like to think of myself. So having understood how deeply Indian idealism has affected the world, I am also I'm also currently contemplating the possibility that these early Mahayanists, what they were trying to do is actually to try and bring the world together. That they were trying to. I mean, in many ways, they have improved the world, haven't they? They created institutions that have caused rapid progress for much of the world. So it's not all. I mean, it's a mixed bag what they've done. But I think in their hearts, I mean, they were trying to bring the world together using Indian philosophy and Indian institutions. So I think that also shows us the way forward. I think we should revive Indian idealism, this most sophisticated philosophy ever thought of by the human mind, we should revive, because currently I feel it's dead. India is a very deeply, the Indian psyche is currently very realist. It takes the world of appearances to be extremely real and independently real. So even the sciences today take a very realist approach towards the universe, but we know that reality is very fussy. We can't be too sure about everything that we know from our senses. So I think the answer is in Indian idealism. I think it has to be revived for the betterment and for the peace and prosperity and progress of the world as a whole. Because
You know,
if
yeah.
we should judge a tree by its fruit, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I kind of feel
Fruits of Indian idealism has been great.
Yeah, I think that with your book and the next few books that you're coming out with, you should. I hope you can start an institute and encourage. Have students come in, and it needs a lot of funding. But what you're doing is so important. And of course, you're a doctor. You have an analytical thinking, but I kind of feel like that's what's lacking right now. For young people, a place to go. You found the Ramakrishna Mission and the library there, but I don't know if many people have access to it, and it's becoming less and less available to the young Indian, wherever they are. What you said about this is all out in the public. We also had a talk with the Bhaskar Kamble, who wrote the book about the imperishable seed, about the history of Indian math, and he said everything is out there, but we are not looking. Right. So the one question, I want to go to one of the questions here. The first question is, a challenge for most Indians is a lack of Sanskrit or Pali language learning. So did you read the English translations or the original? And did that have an impact on your thinking?
In an era where people are literally losing the ability to read, I think we should not give the extra cognitive load of demanding that you should read in the originals. I think a translation is, and everything I've done is with the use of translation. Whenever a question struck me too much, only then would I go and try and refer and understand word for word the source. But my personal experience, I wouldn't take up the extra cognitive load of doing the origin, because it is quite a load on top of all these books to have to study the original languages too. I don't think I would recommend it, but if you think you can do it, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. So if you can do it in the originals, do it. But for me personally, the daunting challenges ahead, I don't think I'll be able to do that.
Vaishagi, you want to go through some of the questions?
Yeah, sure. So, I think there's a good one here, and you sort of answered that. Like, what was the point of exporting all of these idealism? So, you said they wanted to bring the world together, and I think that's your take on why they did this. Why do you think they wanted to do that? Like, what was in it for the Indians and the Buddhist monks who were doing that? What did they see as their purpose?
I mean, perhaps we should look at it rather than from an ethnic or religious background. Why don't we look at at a species level, the changes they created at a species level? I mean, we are essentially a species, aren't we? So we should, at some point in our history, we should start thinking about the species as a whole. So their actions have, in my final summary, in my final judgment, have had a net positive effect at a species level. They have brought together the species in multiple ways. They have created institutions that have spread across all the world. Almost all the societies in the world today are running on institutions they built, or they laid the foundations for. So I'm choosing to judge a tree by its fruit. The actions of these Indian idealists have been a net positive for the world. Even if for India itself, eventually, India was the third order effect of all this was India was destroyed. You can say centuries after what they did, Christianity arose, Islam came up as an offshoot from Christianity, and that came back and destroyed Mahayana. Mahayana was destroyed in the Islamic invasions. All the universities were destroyed by the third order effect of the Mahayanists themselves.
Yeah.
So you can call it karma, you can call it the quirk of history, you can call it whatever. But even though the Mahayanists destroyed themselves, I think on the whole, their effect on the world was positive.
Another question, I think, is more about dating. Do you believe that the dating that is currently broadly accepted for Buddha's lifetime, the Upanishads, the Vedas, do you think they're correct or incorrect?
I think the Upanishads took centuries. It's not it didn't happen all at once in one century. I think it spread out more. I mean, the philosophic, the Indian idealism per se, I think it begins with with Mahidasa Aitareya. He is considered the author of the Aitareya text, the Aitareya Vedic text. I think he's the father of Indian philosophy. The fact that the father of Indian philosophy also seems to be a proto-idealist, I think that's very interesting. And I think that he lived around 1900 1800 BCE, based on my internal analysis of the text. So that's where it begins, and I more or less accept the dating of Buddha to the 6th century BPC. I don't see any strong reason to avoid it. And I also think Indians are pretty ridiculous when it comes to dating. Despite having such a huge corpus of text, the failure to establish a single sheet anchor. They're all looking at the stars. It's pathetic. That's the only word I can. Instead of having sheet anchors, instead of using pratyaksha pramana, you using the ground under your feet, they choose to use always the stars. I think it's a shoddy and lazy thing to do. The date should come from the ground, not from the stars. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed it too. People trying to date everything using nakshatras and things like that, the astronomical softwares and stuff. I think that shows the lack of historical sense that is deeply affecting the in Indian psyche. This is where the Greeks outdid us, I would say. They were very meticulous with their history. They had sheet anchors, and yeah. So I currently accept the archaeological dates. I would choose it any day over astronomical dates, because you'll have noticed the chapter of forgery, the anomaly of forgery. That's what this is what I discussed there. I mean, people have been forging things, forging books for thousands of years. Just because something is written in a book, it does not mean it really happened. It does not mean it was there originally when the book was written. We can never be sure. Humans are quite undependable creatures that way. Humans do all kinds of stuff with books. After understanding how deep forgery is in almost all the cultures of the world, I take things with a pinch of salt.
Yes, I think that's good advice in general when it comes to reading.
Trust but verify.
Trust but verify, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think a new question has just popped up. The person says, you mentioned Yogacara school's influence, but how do you think about Madhyamika philosophy's influence in the Mediterranean region, not just in the epistemic tools, but also ontological influence?
Yeah. So, as I said, these monks were taking not just Buddhist books; they were taking all kinds of Indian books, Hindu books as well. So, in the early Christian communities, the early Christian community was a deeply philosophical movement, contrary to what it seems to be now. Contrary to what we may think, the early Christian movement was deeply philosophical, and the reason for that is also at this point obvious. I believe it was because the founding fathers were Indian philosophers. The people who founded the movement, the brains behind the project, they were Indian philosophers. So, as expected, their successors would be deeply philosophical. And you find an Indian-like behavior among them. In that, what is the greatest philosophical trait of Indians? The extreme diversity of thought that we see in India. We have everything from the crudest realists to the most extreme idealists. The most extreme idealists are the Shunyavadins. They deny anything is real. I mean, they accept that everything is Shunya. They accept nothing. So that's extreme idealism. And on the other side, we have the crudest realism also. So let's not go there for now. It's very controversial area. So we find this same diversity in the Mediterranean world among early Christians. There were Christians who believed in emptiness. The Perite, I forgot their name. There was a group of Christians who believed that, just like the extreme Indian idealists, that emptiness is the final principle. There were Christians who at the same time believed that the human soul has three natures, just like an Indian realist would believe. Okay? The Sankhya philosophy of Kapila, that's what we're talking about. We find both Indian realism and Indian idealism represented among early Christian communities. And one of these groups eventually gained power, and they eliminated all other groups. That's what happened in the 4th century. So this bottleneck event erased the original Christian diversity. So yeah. So what was the question? I hope I've answered it.
Maybe. the question was basically, where is it? How do you think the philosophy influenced the this thing, but not just in epistemic, but
Yeah.
also in ontology? And I think you do kind of, right?
Yeah.
Like
So
the
it
diverse.
was there. The influence was there, but it's erased. It's gone now.
Yeah. And I think you kind of actually, even in the book, you go over the ontological part as well, as right at the end where you say, like, both these, they seem to follow the same pathway, both Buddhism and
Yeah.
Christianity to a certain extent. So you kind of
Yeah.
answered that
The way
question.
they evolved.
Yeah.
So, Joe, I do have a question. Actually, that's a comment in the Q&A too. The world is always confused about how democracy works in India. Why is it plural? Why is it so different from, let's say, Indian neighborhoods? And I think your book kind of gives a sense of uh, that ingrained sense of ancient knowledge to some extent, maybe in the Indian psyche. And so, the principles of democracy, etc., I'm thinking still works because we have some what is that thing called, living memory, if I may call it.
I think we should thank the founding fathers of Indian philosophy for this very positive trait of ours. The founding fathers of Indian philosophy, the Upanishadic thinkers. I mean, and the forgotten thinkers of the Saraswati Sindhu civilization. I mean, we don't know who they were, but whoever they were, those rishis who lived during Harappan era, but whose names have not been preserved, but who created those elaborate legal systems, who created a society where diversity of thought was respected and cherished and propagated. I think we had a pretty good bunch of founding fathers, just like one can say the United States of America had a very good bunch of founding fathers too. In comparison to our modern ones, I'm kind of envious for the founding fathers of the United States, you could say. I mean, we had a bunch of, yeah.
I think there is one last question. I don't know if you want to take it.
Yes, sure. Yes. I can say our last question for the day. I think, how do we ensure? So, as you said, these Buddhist monks going out to the Mediterranean world, spreading their ideas, maybe come back to hurt them eventually. How do we make sure this doesn't happen to Sanatana Dharma as we have it today? That maybe, and this is a little hard to predict. 1,000 years from now, who knows what will happen? But what do you think we should do to make sure that it doesn't happen to us?
Become rogue philosophers again. More rogue than anything the rogue world can throw at us. Mutate faster than them. Keep 10 steps ahead. Stop being so obsessed with preservation and maybe take a little risk in your thinking. Take a little risk with your systems of thought. Don't try to control entropy. Just flow with it. Indians are so afraid of change, so afraid of loss of a single word in a text. And this is where Hindu idealism and Buddhist idealism diverge. The Buddhist idealists don't care about language. They don't care about the written word. They don't care what happens to that text. They don't care if the meaning changes. They don't care if the words are lost, if it mutates. They're not afraid of the entropy of language. But the Hindus, on the other hand, they're very obsessed with the written word. They've been struggling very hard to preserve everything so perfectly, and that has been very critical for preserving the Vedic corpus. But that has also had a negative effect of making people very conservative and very averse to the idea of a little diversity in thinking. It changes. Yeah. So I think that's how you save yourself from the monsters of history, the creatures of history. They will keep coming. You have to be rogue philosophers to deal with that.
In your talks and when you talk about the book and content, have you come across people who say, Joe, I want to be like you. I want to read. I want to learn. Where do I start? And I think we asked for a reading recommendation. I know your text has a lot of references, but for a beginner, maybe if you can give a couple of references reading, for a beginner.
Yeah.
For me, at least for me, I think going in chronological order has its perks, but I wouldn't stress on it. I don't do that anymore. I just take whatever subject interests me. I read it. For example, so where to start for that question? I would recommend the Upanishads. So that's where philosophy begins. I will make a very daring statement now. All philosophy is a series of footnotes to the Upanishads. Okay? It doesn't matter which civilization, which religion, whatever. Everything is a series of mutations out of the Upanishads. And the Upanishads is Indian idealism. It's the first text of Indian idealism is the Upanishads. So I would highly recommend. I've recommended this to many people, and I am shocked that people are still not reading it. I mean, there are people I've sent the book to, and even a month later they haven't read it. I don't know what the block is. I mean, there aren't many people reading the Upanishads. I have experienced that personally. So start there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joe. I think we're going to wrap up. It's 1 hour, and it's very late for Joe. He's dialing in from India.
No, I'm a night owl.
So this worked perfectly. But I appreciate your time and engaging with us. And I know you're coming out with a few other books, and we look forward to reading it and having you on again. But definitely looking forward to your, the series of episodes that you're doing in India. And I think that needs to be promoted widely. While to the general audience, thank you all for joining. Please follow CoHNA. And we do bring interesting personalities and authors, like Joe to our platform. It's always a learning experience for all of us. And I hope we continue to learn and stand proud, of Indian origin. Whatever our faith is, we are of Indian origin and we need to be proud of it. So thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time. And thank you so much, Joe. This was very much fun.
Thank you for this great opportunity. Thank you.